Hello, welcome back to my studio. This is Colleen with Designs of Value Art. And today we're going to talk about transferring the design from your reference material. We're going to transfer this pretty little rosebud and how we actually get that taken care of. So I've done it many times on film, but I've also started out my classes with my design on the project sometimes. So I want you to see how I do it step by step. Now I'm just going to use this watercolor paper. It's not my favorite. It's the real inexpensive kind. I'm not going to really paint it. We're just going to transfer it today. This is a transfer paper. It's lighter gray on one side and a darker gray on the other. Whenever you are going to transfer a design, you always want to have the dark side down, light side up. And that way, and you can always lift it up and check it. Make sure that it's transferring the way you want it to. So we're going to start out with our tracing paper. Excuse me. And this is tracing paper. It's Master's Touch. I pick it right up at Hobby Lobby. Again, I always get it when it's on sale. This is a nice quality paper. They do a pretty good job with their tracing paper. So I'm going to just grab one sheet here if I can get it separate. There we go. And you can see my hand through it. So that's what you want. Set this aside over here. Okay, so I'm going to take this. And I like to line up my paper. Got a paper clip here somewhere. I just used it. Oh, there we go. Usually at the bottom and on one side, I'll line up my paper. The tracing paper is 9 by 12, and my papers that my reference material is 8.5 by 11 right from my copier. So I always like to line up one edge and then the other. I'm going to just turn this over because I don't want to mark my watercolor paper. And I'm going to grab my normal everyday number 2, HB number 2. And I usually, if I'm starting a project in tracing like this, I'm going to try to finish each petal to completion. And the reason I do that is I had a project that I was painting, and I think it was roses and rosebuds, and I had like a little rosebud up here, and I did it up here, but I didn't do the stem. And I forgot to put the stem in, and it looked really strange. So it's important to remind yourself to do that. So for me, I complete the entire item I'm working on in its totality, whether it's the stem and then the leaves or however I'm doing it. I'm going to make sure that particular item I'm working on is completely traced. And then that doesn't happen to me anymore. I got kind of a dull pencil here. So I just have a sharpener over here. I'm going to sharpen it real quick. When I'm doing this, I like a nice sharp pencil. Alright, so we've got a small petal back here. And don't worry if you have to erase. That's why God made erasers. So that one is pretty much done. And sometimes you can see through this tracing paper and sometimes you can't. So you've got to kind of, if you need to lift it up, take a look at it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Oh, now wait a minute. I want to see one other thing here. Yeah, that's pretty good. And now I'm going to just go over to this side over here. I hope I won't bore you to tears with this. I tried to choose a project that's not real involved. And I have traced it before because I have painted this item. And I'm just going to turn this around so I can get at it a little bit better. And that's what you want to do. Now I'm going to just lift up to look at that. It's not even the best reference material because it's really hard to see as to what is going on here. There is a little sepal right there. It comes down here right over there. Okay, so we've got those petals in. This does come like this. So I always like to kind of go back and make sure that I've got this going the way it needs to be going. So let's finish this one so I don't forget. And there's some white right in these areas here. So it's important to be sure, well, I need to erase that. Because we will go over how to use your masking fluid in another segment down the road a ways here. Okay, now I'm just going to take a look again. So you've got just a little tiny petal in here, like that. Now this one also has some of that white in it, highlight. Their petals are folding in like this. Right. And I'm just going to take a look and see what's going on with these sepals. Just turn this again. Does this have to be absolutely perfect? No. But you can lose a lot of the nuances to a design if you don't try to keep some of these little details in here. So that's important to do. And we're going to just do the little petal and the stems and the sepals. We're not going to worry about the leaves. Like I said, we won't be painting this. It's just to teach you how to transfer. Now this is the end of that petal, but there's a flip in there. I'm just gonna bring that highlight to my attention there, so I remember that there's a highlight right there, and I just do dotted lines. And this is actually a separate petal up front. And that's an extra petal back there. I'm going to go back to the outside edges here. There's a couple little ones that are easy enough to do. And it looks like it goes like this. And it looks like this comes up like this. So anytime you need to lift up your paper, go right ahead and do it. However, I do recommend you keep one hand on it, and that way it won't shift on you when you're lifting it up to look at it closer. All right. So this is going to connect all these little areas together here. This petal actually comes all the way down like this. And so does this petal. Okay. This one's hard to see, but it does come down here. All right. I'm going to do this edge. And I want to get that highlight in there, so I'm sure to mask it off later. when I'm going to start doing that. Now, where does these petals separate here? I guess that's all one big petal. Okay. Again, it brings my attention that there's a highlight right there. And I'm going to just move this a little bit like that so I can get at it. Looks like you can still see me, so that's a good thing. There we go. And there's some more highlights in this area. Like that. We're going to do the stem, and then that's what we're going to transfer. Do you want to look at this one more time? All right. So this petal separates this one out here. All right. I knew something was wrong up here. There we go. Sure it's lined up correctly, and it looks like it is. And we're just going to ignore that leaf. Okay, and at this point is where I go back and look to make sure. Got some highlights up here and some highlights up here. Not really defined per se. However, you don't want to ignore them. And there is a petal in here like this. Okay. So good. I'm happy with the transfer. I think it all makes sense to me in my mind as to where we're going with each one of the petals. So we're good that way. Now this has got a highlight over here. I don't think I would mask it, but just it lets me know the light source is on the right hand side. And it's important to know the light source. Now this is a strange little, I guess I would call it a rosebud, because the highlight is right here. It could have a very front highlight rather than one up here that comes down. The stem indicates that it's a right hand light source, but I would say it's probably more of a frontal light source. So, and it's important to know that. And I kind of missed this nice little flip here. So I want to make sure that I get that correct. So it's really pretty on the... See what a difference that makes? Just a little bit of a change in that petal, and it gives you a ruffle. Okay, so there's our design, our transfer. Now I'm going to separate this. And this is the paper we're going to put it on. I'm going to put it right where I want it. And I'm going to use my frog tape. This one actually happens to be a medium weight, or a medium sticky, however you want to call it. Medium adhesion, they say it. I would actually go for a lighter one. I didn't know I picked this one up. I actually think I got this right at Hobby Lobby though, so I'm surprised they had it. And I usually just tear my tape off. And I'm just going to use it to hold it in place today. It's not going to be taped down or anything, so. Tears very easily. And I do like to tape it usually at least 2 sides. So I've got this on the bottom where I want it. So I'm going to tape it down there. And this side's a little bit longer, so I'm going to fold it up. It won't affect the design. And I'm going to tape it down here. Hold that down a little bit harder and up there. Okay. Now I've got an open edge here, and I wanted that on purpose so I can slide my transfer paper. So I got the dark side down, the gray side up. Don't want to go in for me. There we go. There it goes. Of course. All right, and just slide it in where you want it. And then if you need to check it, you can lift it up like this and make sure it's showing up. Now I could go back over it with my pencil, but I wouldn't be able to see where I've been. So I always like to either use a red pencil, which I don't seem to have down here. So what I am going to use, and I had one sitting out, what did I do with it? There it is. I'm going to just use a black, and I think we'll try it. Yeah, we'll be able to tell where I've been and where I haven't been. So if you can get a different colored one, sometimes that works a little bit better. It's very apparent where you've gone with your lines and where you haven't. So this is, now I'm just going to go ahead and go right over the same lines that we just did. And then that transfers it. We'll do something up here so you can see it better. Right onto our watercolor paper. It's nice that you're able to see it. And I do put those little dots in there for the highlights because I think that's real important. There we go. To keep track of where your highlights are. That's a real important process because we're going to mask some of them off. And I'll show you how I do that. And I've got a line here that I'm not quite sure. No, this is right. Flips over, that flips over. All right. So that's a good idea for the reference material to be sitting fairly close at hand too when you're going over your lines in case something doesn't seem right to you. Which if it's an intricate project, it can be very confusing. And one thing that I recommend if it is an intricate project, take a piece of 8.5 by 11 plain printing paper, 2 of them, cut out a hole in the center and make it a small one because if it's intricate you want a smaller area, and then you can take that watercolor paper, that printing paper, and put it right over the section that you're looking at and working on, and then it makes your eyes go right to that section and it makes it much more clear in your mind as to what that petal is doing and what it's not doing. So that's a good tip. Even if you use a index card, that's what I seem to end up using quite often, is my index cards to do that. And you do want to check periodically just to make sure it is going through. Are you pressing hard enough? And yeah, it looks great. So that's a good thing to double check yourself on. And just make sure that it is coming through. You don't want to have it turned upside down and what you're doing is inking the back of this paper and go through the entire project and then realize you had it in there backwards. I've done that. So you want to be cautious with that and not waste your time. So it's always important to double check yourself. I was actually entering a contest at one point, and I had got my design completely on and painted almost halfway, and it was in oils, so it was quite the project. It was a huge board that I was doing, and I looked at it, I set it up, and that's always a good thing to do. Set it up, walk away, and take a look at it. And had I done that sooner, I would have realized I had the tracing too far over, and it was all off kilter, and it really, I had to start all over. It was not a good thing at all. But live and learn, right? That's how you have to figure it out. Sometimes taking it right to a mirror and looking at it, it gives you a backward view, and that helps you realize if you've made a mistake as well. So that's always something you can do. And if you're not sure, if you're painting something and you go, geez, there's something wrong with this, I don't know what it is, prop it up where you can see it every day if you can, and glance at it every day. Look at it in a mirror, turn it upside down, look at it upside down, and sooner or later, just a quick glance at it out of the corner of your eye, and you're going to go, oh, that's the wrong color, or that just doesn't look right because it's the wrong color in the wrong area of the design. The value is incorrect. Whatever must be wrong with it, and it'll just jump out at you. So that's always something you can do too, is have it propped up somewhere you can see it. Ask someone else. My husband is very good, especially when I'm doing portraits. And I have a problem with the eyes. I've been studying eyes, and I think I've got them figured out finally. But he would always say, well, this eye's off just a little bit. It's not looking the same direction as the other one. And I'd say, oh, you're right. That's what's wrong with it. So now before I take this tape off, I'm going to remove my transfer paper, and you can reuse that many, many, many times. And the more you use it, the lighter it becomes. So that's not a bad thing either. Okay, so yeah, it looks like I got everything on there. I'm going to put my pen away so I don't lose it. Remove my tape. And I do reuse the tape because then it gets less tacky and easier to take up. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside. Now, if I painted this in that soft pinky color, what would happen with the lines on there? That would all show through. So the next step that we have is erasing. We have a couple different erasers, and I'm going to show you another trick because I got a black mark over here. I could probably erase it, but I'm going to show you another trick with that. And I just saw, this is my pen eraser. It's a mono, again, I get it right at Dick Blick. A mono zero, they call it, by Tombro. And it has eraser in there instead of pen or pencil, so it works really well. This is a kneaded eraser, and they call it that because you knead it like this between your hands, and If you need to, you can pull it out like this and do it like this and then re-knead it together. It gets rid of the dark graphite that it collects for you, so it doesn't smear it back on. So I'm going to start with this, and I just hold on to my paper and roll it. Just like this. Now down here, I'm not going to be too terribly concerned that it has to be fairly light, because my colors are going to be darker than the petals as well as the sepals here. I'm not going to be too concerned about those three. However, I do want my petals to be fairly light. I don't want them so light I can't see them, but I want them to be fairly light because I do not want the lines to show through. Once we do the first water glaze and with the color, it's kind of like a color map of where we're going with the colors on the design. Then you can go ahead and erase if you need to again at that point, even though we've done it now. And I'm just gonna move this over so I've got a sturdier, there we go. And go opposite the way that you do the line. Sometimes that will pick up more, and sometimes you can just take the tip of it too if you've got a real stubborn line that just doesn't want to come up, because that'll help too. It really does. It's amazing. I'm just going to knead this together again. So we got some stubborn lines, which is normal. Especially for a botanical. You always want to make sure you get most of those up. All right, so I'm going to show you the trick with the edge there. This is just a magic eraser. Actually, I think this is probably the cheapy stuff that I buy right at Walmart. And I just get the tip of it wet. And gently, you don't want to, this has got some kind of a silicone in it or something. I don't know how they make it actually, but you can damage your paper if you push too hard. So that will remove any spots or grease or extra paint that you don't want on your project. All right, so let's change to a Faber-Castell dust-free. There's a couple different companies that make these, and if they get really, really dark and you can't get it off, you can just actually take a little knife to it and take it off, but these work really well. Does create crumbs. It's not dust, but it does create crumbs, so I always take that off of the table and dump it right into my garbage can I have underneath my feet, and take it off that way, because you don't want it to end up in your paint and then it ends up in your project, and you don't want that. Now this looks like I'm pushing really, really hard. I'm not. But those tips are important because they're going to be light in value. And we've got enough on here. I want to just get that all off of there. gently rub it. You can even use one of the big brushes. I have one when I'm doing charcoal portraits. I have a big brush that I brush everything off with so I'm not smearing it, and that works really well too. Actually, I think it's a brand new makeup brush, so big one. And for charcoal especially, it can smear as you go to take it off if you're not careful. Alright, this is getting better. Like I said, I'm not going to be too terribly concerned down here. Now these petals over here are a little bit darker, and that's another good reason to have your reference material close at hand that you can glance at and see, geez, which ones are real light and which ones are real dark. So which ones do I have to work on the most? Some of them just become real stubborn. It depends on how hard you push. I've got a very heavy hand when I'm drawing or transferring paper designs like that. I don't know why, I always have had. Alright, so keep my table clean. That's not too terribly bad. However, you can take your eraser pen, or whatever you want to call it, and go over the darker lines too. And after the first water glaze and color, wet on wet color that's on there, and then you're going to erase again, this is the brush or the pen that I would use to erase it with, because you can get it right in where you need to get that out of there, and you're not erasing watercolor which is the last thing you want to do. I usually do this kind of work in front of the TV when I'm watching, oh, like last night we were watching football. It's football season. Do a lot of sketching then too, so. See, and you can just push it up like a pen, and more eraser comes out if you need it. Then there's some that are a little bit more square for bigger purposes, so got all different sizes to choose from. But you want to be careful if you're heavy-handed like me, because you can dent your paper. I think you'd have to press a lot harder than I did on this, but you can dent your paper, and then you're going to have problems with the watercolor because it's going to go into the dent and pool there and become darker. And that might not be what you want with your design, so it's important to not do that too. All right. And again, it's not that important down here. And when you buy these little pens, they do come with lots of extra erasers to fill in. So it works out pretty slick. There we go. I think we're going to call that quits now. Okay, so one thing I really didn't go over, when you're putting your transfer paper down, you want to make sure that you've got it lined up with the edge of the paper the way you want it, etc., etc. So you make sure it's not over to one side like my big project was. So that's how we transfer paper and erase it to make it light enough to do watercolors on it and soft little petals. And then the next project, I'm going to show you how to mask some of your highlights to save the white of the paper. So I'll see you then.